So now looking at erotica. So the first, again, the conclusion, just to tell you the conclusion in the beginning, because we may have to end it soon, is that the erotica, whether it's erotica or, so it's romance novels, or it's hardcore pornography, we're going to see the same thing, the lack of a shared narrative world, that they're looking at sexuality very differently. So I already told you about the first article by Jennifer Weiner in the New York Times 218, which is titled, "We Need Body Stripper Sex Ed." She calls it sex ed. And she says, basically, I already told you this, she says, for example, how many of you used to read Judy Blume, or is that out of the... Okay, so she says, I was a reader as a teenager, she says, and most of what I knew came from books, starting with a copy of Judy Blume's Forever that made the rounds of the cafeteria in second grade, and later I devoured dozens of Harlequin romances. Okay, so she's making this trajectory that she learned about sex from these things. And they taught, she claims, that these books, the Harlequin romances, because they have that female gaze, taught readers that sexual pleasure was something women could not just hope for but insist upon. And she actually said they helped to make me a feminist. I don't agree with that at all, because they're this pure fantasy, and in the end, it's, but the point of at least the woman being the agent, the subject, in that sense, linguistically speaking, it's interesting. She says, when you don't know how to ask, she's kind of saying what this Crawford article said at the end of here, when you don't know how to ask, when you can't bring yourself to tell, when you don't possess the language with which to talk about desire, that's when you end up with crossed wires, mixed signals, mixed messages, with a guy who goes to sleep thinking, that was fun, and a girl who goes home crying in an Uber. So her conclusion goes back to Aziz Ansari, that he said, you know, we had consensual sex and it was fun, and she says, he pressed himself on me, and so forth, and I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't leave, etc. Okay. So let's look at romance novels, and perhaps the most, there are all kinds of romance novels, but what always has to be is it has to have some kind of displacement. So you're either on a cruise ship, or in an exotic country, or if you're in your own country, then you're on Wall Street, or in some you get into some very rich milieu, so it's romanticized in that way. But the most extreme are what are called a subgenre. So there are subgenres. There's the ones that are like Gothic romances, like 19th century novels. But the most interesting one, I think, is what are called chic romances, which is both very racist and the going away from Western culture at the same time is the furthest. So what is a chic romance? It's where a white female, because most of these books you see in the pictures on the covers have these romantic things. It's always, so in the chic romance, you see always some blonde woman with some tall, dark, and handsome guy who is Arab or something along those lines. So for example, in an exotic land, she says the formula is, in an exotic land where it is rumored that men still rule, a tall, dark, and handsome sheik meets a white woman who teaches him how to be ruled by love. This is the blurb on one of those novels. Okay, so this one sentence tells us everything, right? He becomes the object, and she is the agent, and she wins. So here are some quotes, though, from these novels. Though The Sheik and the Princess Bride is one of the novels. Though Tariq's domineering ways reminded her of the controlling men in her past, Carolyn fell for this sheik's regal bearing. Well, weddings were Carolyn's business. She was a wedding planner. And she was just the woman to teach Tariq how to accept love as a lifelong commitment. So she was going to teach him how to love. She needed, same from the same novel, she needed a better word This is very interesting. So now, first is, she goes in there saying, I've seen this guy and I'm going to get me that guy. Exactly the opposite of what those courtship stories where the girls would never say that. But then she also looks at him as an object, she says. She needed a better word to explain how beautiful he was, but in a totally masculine way. Because beautiful is not a word you would use for a man. Was it his eyes deep browned, thickly lashed and sensual? Was it the firm set of his mouth, the perfect cheekbones, the dark hair? Was it the combination of features, the determination of his expression? So she wants him to be beautiful and have long eyelashes, but she also wants him to have a determination of his expression. Because when we get to the sex scenes, it's going to be, he pressed his hard body against her. It's not going to say penis, of course, but she has to be forced in some way and so forth. So it's like having it both ways. But she's the one controlling the narrative, right? And she's the one looking at the guy. So we have a feminine Western desiring subject with an imaginary Eastern landscape open to the white woman's gaze, and we're a place of mystery and fantasy, and some of them pretend, here's another one. The gorgeous sheik seemed a caring, generous man until he imprisoned her with his concubines. Was Ali creating a desert fantasy to amuse Francis? Or was his marriage proposal serious, and was she going to end up in a harem? Or was she going to westernize him and have her way with him? So the hero is a sex object. The term chic even came into vogue for a while as a word for a man with an excess of masculine sex appeal. And here's one more description, and then we'll end this one. His tawny skin glowed with health, and the stunning bronze eyes gleamed like precious metal, both brilliant and unreadable. So he still has to be beautiful, but either have a hard expression or be unreadable. Because if you didn't add that, if you just said he was beautiful and had long eyelashes,
He'd be a feminine man.
he'd be a feminine man. So you describe the physicality in a sensuous way, but you have to add some hardness at the end, which keeps him masculine and also prepares us for the sex scene that's soon to follow inevitably. He has long brown fingers, which are often wound through the heroine's hair. He's dark, but not too dark. Golden, bronze, tawny, maybe even brown, but never black. He's exotic enough to be desirable, but not too exotic to be incorporated into the white Anglo-Saxon empire, says the author of this article. So, romance novels is another topic. Now let's look at a male romance novel. Alex Mitchell's article, where is she? Right here, 2005. A new romance. This is an article that appeared in the New York Times. And here is a quote. And these romance novels had titles such as Hot Sauce, Razor Burn, Nick of Time. Is this supposed to be funny? Okay. Well, they're two guys, so.
Oh!
They're gay romance novels, right?
Okay, I thought they were straight ones.
No. This is now, we're changing. We finished, we use chic romances for the heterosexual female being in control, okay? And having as the object this sensuous guy with long eyelashes, but a hard look nevertheless. Okay, now we get a new romance with two guys. So first, this is the brave new world of gay male romance novels. And the publisher is called Hot Sauce. Okay, so everything is a little bit, it imitates the formula fiction of romance novels, heterosexual women's novels, that you meet cute or you meet enemies. You can have either one, but you have to have some problems and then you end up with a happy ending. So you have to have that. But how does it do that with a gay romance? And it always does it by imitating those formulas